So, welcome to episode 2 of Historians with Coffee in Cars, and the twist is that we've run out of coffee.
I came here to do two things, Richard. One of them's talk about history and drink coffee, and we're all out of coffee.
So you're going to have to talk about history, Warren.
I sure am.
So on that note, what are you going to be talking about in your paper at a conference which is happening at the East Tennessee Historical Society starting tomorrow?
I'm going to be talking about Churchill and military intelligence, and how actually Churchill, everybody in the world, Christopher Andrew being the most notable, but lots and lots of people, David Stafford, of course, have written about Churchill and military intelligence. And one of the things I want to do in my paper is talk about how Churchill developed this sort of love for military intelligence and his interest in reading sort of raw intelligence as it came in. He actually developed an interest in this as a young soldier. Yep. That a lot of this came out of his time being in India, or even Cuba, in fact, which may have itself been an actual kind of reconnaissance mission for military intelligence. Of course, in those days.
Let's dial back a bit. Not everybody's going to know what Churchill was doing in Cuba or when. So.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So, Churchill went to Cuba as a war correspondent in 1895 during the Spanish-American War, and was attached to a Spanish, I'm going to say brigade, Spanish unit, and was essentially recording this for the British presses. But before he went, he got permission and was told to investigate the kind of rifles that were being used and the kind of powderless bullets that were being used by the Spanish. And so he was actually also on an intelligence mission for British military intelligence. And in these days, of course, MI6 and GCHQ and SAS and these things didn't exist. This predates all that. So a lot of how military intelligence was done by these sorts of informal kind of just conversations, right? Backroom conversations. And so Churchill was very much a part of that set and found himself frequently doing reconnaissance as journalism, which I think is quite interesting.
Yes. And so you mentioned, of course, that then, so just to mention that he went to Cuba kind of during his leave. He just sort of passed out of Sandhurst. Very adventurous kind of guy. It's like, didn't want to hang around. It's like, I'm going to go to Cuba and see a war. Comes back, goes to India.
That's right.
And for quite a while is kind of bored out of his mind, right?
Yeah, and he spends a lot of his time reading and doing that, and he doesn't actually get involved with military intelligence again until he is dispatched to the Malacan with the field force there, which is sort of up in the valleys, up into Pakistan and even Afghanistan. But he does a lot of what he would have imagined as typical military reconnaissance stuff and gathering tactical information and bringing it back. And he even would later write a paper about his thoughts on how that might be improved for the military magazine of the day. And then, of course, he was involved with intelligence. There was quite an interesting thing in the River War when he leaves India.
Yeah, so the River War is the book he wrote about the Sudan.
That's right. And so when he was in the Sudan, he wrote about his experiences and was really interested. He worked with Ronald Wingate, who was in charge of military intelligence under with a mustache.
The mustache guy. That narrows it down in Victorian Britain.
The famous general on the poster. Kitchener. Ronald Wingate was in charge of military intelligence under Kitchener, and he talked. He dedicates the book to Wingate and all the intelligence operations that he was a part of and worked with while he was in Sudan. But one of the funniest things, this is a great Churchill story. Churchill, when he first gets there and he's out on a reconnaissance mission with the cavalry, he captures a guy, and he's like, oh, this is one of the dervishes, and he captures, and he brings him back, and he's really excited to say that he's found this spy working for the dervish, and it turned out to be someone actually in the employ of Ronald Wingate who had been spying on the dervish, and everyone sort of made fun of him, and he
I can't imagine why.
He sort of was red in the face, and he records this in the first edition of the River War, which only lasted a year, and then he took it out because he didn't want anyone to think less of him in the second edition, which I think is really remarkable.
So we're going to carry on with more episodes of Historians with Coffee in Cars when we have more coffee.
Yeah, we're out of coffee, but here's to you, Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David.